Shopper. Crawford.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Hardy.
Here.
Dyke. Artino.
Here.
Genesi.
Here. Mr. Artino.
Mr. Mayor, I move we excuse Mr. Dyke from the meeting tonight. He's tied up in surgeries.
Any discussion on that motion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Artino.
Yes.
Genesi.
Yes.
Shopper.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes. Okay, next item on the list is we're gonna do the oath of office, for Mr. Jones by the city law director. I did that wrong, yeah, sorry.
So, Mr. Jones, if you would just stand and raise your right hand and just repeat after me. I solemnly swear
I solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of
and the
Ohio,
state of Ohio,
and will obey the laws thereof,
and will obey the laws thereof,
and that I will in all respects
and that I will in all respects
uphold and enforce the provisions of the charter
uphold and enforce the provisions of the charter
and ordinances of this city,
and ordinance of this city.
and I will faithfully discharge the duties of city council member
And I will faithfully discharge the duties of city council member,
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon of which I am about to enter.
Okay, congratulations, and I just need you to sign that oath and return it to me. Thank you.
So Ms. Lane, do we need to do the roll call again?
Why don't you? Yeah, that's
Okay.
best.
Okay, let's have the clerk call the roll again, please.
Okay. Shopper.
Here.
Crawford.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Hardy.
Here.
Dyke. Artino. Genesi.
Here. Mr. Artino, would you like to make the same motion?
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
I move that we excuse Mr. Dyke from the meeting tonight.
Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Artino.
Yes.
Genesi.
Yes.
Shopper. Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes. Okay, next on the agenda here is the nomination and election of vice mayor. The seat was vacated, and the chair will accept nomination.
Mr.
Ms. Crawford,
I would like to move that Mr. Genesi be appointed the vice mayor, please.
any discussion? Mr. Genesi, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I'm thinking about it, but yes.
Any more discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Artino.
No.
Genesi.
Yes.
Shopper.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Genesi. Will you have the oath of office administered by the law director?
Okay, Mr. Genesi, repeat after me and raise your right hand. I solemnly swear
I solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Ohio,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Ohio,
and will obey the laws thereof,
and will obey the laws thereof,
and that I will in all respects uphold and enforce the provisions of the charter and ordinances of the city.
and that I will in all respects uphold and enforce the provisions of the charter and ordinances of the city,
And will faithfully discharge the duties of vice mayor,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of vice mayor
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations, and the other one, I just need you to sign that, and I will sign as well.
Okay, we have a couple of awards, and I'd like to just say before we start here, all of our safety services teams deserve recognition. Every day, every shift, these guys go out, guys and gals, they have the citizen safety at the forefront of their responsibility, and that they're all worthy of individual accommodation. So with that, if I could have firefighters Ruggles and Bauer come forward, please. Captains or some of the captains here, you guys would like to come forward as well?
That's okay.
No? Okay. Okay, we've got two awards. I'm gonna read them kind of in tandem. They say the same thing, well, with the exception of the name. So I'm gonna read one and do the awards for both gentlemen. On May 6, 2019, the Huron Fire Department was dispatched to a mutual aid call for a vehicle submerged in water in a marina. Firefighters Charlie Ruggles and Kevin Bauer responded in an ambulance, while other personnel responded to headquarters and prepared for dive operations. Upon their arrival, firefighters Ruggles and Bauer were alerted to a bystander standing on a vehicle's windshield and the driver still inside the vehicle. Both Ruggles and Bauer donned cold water exposure suits, grabbed a small emergency scuba bottle, and entered the water. They advised the bystander to exit the water due to the cold temperatures and proceeded to alternate using the air bottle as they attempted to save the trapped victim from the vehicle. Once the air bottle's supply was empty, the two continued while holding their breath for more than 5 minutes at a time until they freed the victim through the driver's side window. While the victim did not survive this tragic incident, the quick and heroic action of both firefighters Ruggles and Bauer are commendable. They are a great credit to themselves, the Huron Fire Department, and the state of Ohio, and the city of this great city. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your efforts. We appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to audience comments. I'm going to have Ms. Crawford is going to keep track of the. Oh, sorry. We'll do approval of the minutes next. Anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Martina.
Yes.
Genesi.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes. Now, we'll have audience comments. Ms. Crawford will keep the time. You have 3 minutes. Please step to the podium. State your name and address for the record.
Jason Henners, 1130 Mudbrook Road. Good evening, council. Over the past few months, this council has made many statements about the need for civility and discourse. There's no denial to the importance of civility. Yet I'm concerned that lost in your focus on whether a conversation is civil in tone is whether the content of that conversation is honest. With that misplaced focus, false statements and omissions of the truth are deemed to be okay, so long as they are made politely. Let me give 2 examples. First, at the July 9th meeting, a citizen, Mary Murphy, asked if council was aware of any violations of the Open Meetings Act. It was a simple question. The city manager responded that he was unaware of a breach or violation of the sunshine laws. Mr. White's answer was polite, but it was false. Mr. White, like each of you who was on council last summer, is aware that in September 2018, the Ohio Court of Claims found that the city violated the sunshine laws, namely the Ohio Public Records Act, by unlawfully withholding records I requested. Here is that entry, which is now cited in the Ohio Sunshine Laws Manual. Clearly a violation of the sunshine laws. Mrs. Murphy deserves civility, which is the truth, not polite lies. The truth becomes difficult to find when the city fails to adhere to the Public Records Act, or worse, destroys public records. That brings me to my second example. I recently learned that city employees deleted text messages. Text messages about public business, notably sent by the police around the time my wife was arrested at a council meeting for speaking out against, ironically, sunshine law violations. On the night my wife was arrested, Mr. White texted Chief Lippert and said, "Stacy is disrupting the meeting and Brad is ignited. He wants her arrested." Chief Lippert responded, "I'll get a cop there," and then he texted, "On the way." Oddly, there was not a single record at county dispatch of police officers responding to City Hall. So I then made a public records request for text messages from May 14th and 15th between the police chief and the officers who arrested my wife. After a 3-week delay, the law director informed me that there were 2 potential text messages, but they had been deleted by both the police chief and the arresting officer. Let me repeat, the law director told me that the police chief and the arresting officer deleted texts from the day of or day after my wife was arrested. I then asked the law director for information on when the texts were deleted and how the deletions were permitted under the city's records retention schedule. She told me that my request didn't require a response, so she didn't provide one. Is that what civility looks like? Is that what respect for rules and process look like to this council? Mayor Hardy, on the night my wife was arrested, you said you fully supported the mayor's actions in having my wife lifted out of her chair by two men, thrown against the wall and handcuffed because, as you said, people need to respect the process. If respect for the process, respect for the law and the truth and civility is truly important to you and the rest of this council, I ask that you promptly investigate why these text messages were deleted and ensure accountability for any violation. Thank you.
Hey everybody, Francesca Lindrum, Mansfield Avenue. Good evening and congratulations, Mayor Jones, on your appointment. I'm sure you will be oh, sorry. Mayor Johnson, no, sorry, Mr. Jones, I should say Mr. Jones. Put in there. Sure you'll be a good steward of the new council. Sorry about that, Mayor Hardy. I apologize for that.
That's all right.
You did a great job with me as well. Anyway, thank you for the quick action in filling all of this and making all this happen so that we can move on from other things. I'm sorry that we had to lose the Mayor Hartung. He and the city manager and the council have been efficient and fiscally responsible for many years, allowing the city to be in a very positive position for our future. Well done, everybody. I do hope the residents of Huron understand the thankless work of city government officials and that in doing the city's business, each process takes time to gain support, making government seem very slow to work. On the other hand, when council has moved more quickly to the benefit of the city, that has also caused residents to question. So as I was saying, it's a thankless job because someone is always unhappy. We have a beautiful town that makes people happy living here, working here, visiting here. We can keep it that way by working with each other to get business done rather than against. I hope all residents will keep that in mind, rather than the impatience of some who have cost the city a lot of money, paperwork, and productivity issues with generating items that can easily be gotten online or listened to at council. It would be better suited for everyone to make an effort to speak to our leaders directly, make appointments. If you've got concerns, go to meetings where city business is discussed, and be better informed about the government process by spending time learning rather than criticizing. Having spent 4 years as one of 9 members of a large condominium in Chicago, it was one of the largest buildings. We had served about 2,000 residents. And I've experienced all the things that goes with city government, infrastructure decisions, renovation and building decisions, leaky boilers and failed services, etc. And the fun things like marking holidays and building and resident milestones. What I want everyone to hear is the residual effect of argumentative government. A slate of board members ran at one point to push their agenda for renovations in the building they could not afford. They pushed out members, stayed on for many years. Their agendas were costly, they regularly caused conflict, often used extremely harsh tactics to scare others from running on the board, and even speaking up in meetings. It was ugly, it caused great consternation among the residents, to the point some moved, some filed suits, some grudgingly accepted rather than fight. But that was 15 years ago, and even that now, when I visit or when I talk to people, they still talk about that. It's like a cancer that went through the building and put a pall on the good nature of the residents. Huron doesn't need that kind of negativity. I implore everyone to be on the up and up with your motivations. Do not let petty jealousy or old playground grudges pit you against a fellow resident or council. Find out the facts for yourself, including the motivations of others who have personal agendas. Work with these leaders to keep Huron a Great Lake place and better it with positive actions for creating change. Thank you.
Anyone else like to address council? Okay. Moving on to new business. First item would be a presentation by the Huron Joint Port Authority. Mr. Moore.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, listen, thank you, everyone. For those that you may not know me, I'm Rob Moore. I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney forever, I think it's like almost 40 years. I'm currently working at Ireland's Regional Medical Center. I'm the general counsel and jack of all trades, and it seems like the master of none. But long story short, in addition, I have been the chairman of the Huron Port Authority, and the Port Authority has been around since the late 70s. Back when I was in private practice, I had the fortunate privilege to represent Tom Solberg in Huron Lagoons, and one of the things that he asked me to do was join the Port Authority, and I did. And he's since retired, and of course, to reciprocate, I insisted that his son get drafted on the Port Authority as well. So, for the Joint Port Authority, for those in the audience and those on council that maybe don't know, is that it is a joint district. It's a separate political subdivision of the state of Ohio. But the appointed authority is through this council, 3 seats, and through the township trustees in Huron Township. And then we have 1 member at large. And so we have Bob Barnes, and we have Tom Solberg, and myself, and Gordon Hahn, and Joe Dyke, and a few others that are on the Port Authority that's outlined in my letter. So back in the beginning of this year, and again, many of you maybe don't realize what the Port Authority is. And let me just give a little bit more background. Historically, the reason for the Port Authority was back in the day, before the Ohio Department of Natural Resources took over jurisdiction of submerged land leases. There was an obscure agency in the state level that still exists. It's the Ohio Administrative Agency or something along those lines. They were tasked with the monitoring of submerged land leases. And so, and these submerged land leases oftentimes were anywhere between 40 to 50 to 80 years in length. And there are still a few submerged land leases that are under those jurisdictions, and part of those funds go to the state of Ohio, and part of those funds come to the Port Authority. Now, I can tell you, on any given year, there's a grand total of about $2,500 that we get from the state of Ohio on the submerged land leases. But this Port Authority is, as I mentioned, is a separate subdivision, but is obviously under the control and auspices of this wonderful council, along with the township trustees. But we have a number of statutory powers. We have the ability to issue bonds. We have the ability to contract. We have the ability to lease. We have the ability to purchase and sell property and things along those lines. And so while we've, in the past, and recently we had a very successful program with the Huron Historical Society and the Huron Parks Department, we were able to go ahead and put up the historical markers. And I think that's helped, again, kind of capture what the history of the port was here in Huron. So earlier this year, there was an opportunity that came to my attention and to the Port Authority's attention about the United States Geological Survey. And many of you noticed that wonderful research vessel tied up in one of the slips on the river. And in turn, with a little more research, we discovered that they were looking for a permanent home. They had actually sent out requests for proposals and looking for a deep water port somewhere between Vermilion to Port Clinton, and really identified Huron as really an ideal spot. Easy access out to the lake, obviously deep water. They don't have to worry about some of the problems that exist in either in Sandusky Bay or in Port Clinton, things along those lines. So in turn, we did a little more research, and there was an opportunity where if we were to work with the city and the possibility of leasing, and this would be a lease between the Port Authority and the city, that in turn we could then sublet the property to the United States Geological Survey. Government leasing is kind of an interesting animal, and I had the privilege by working for Firelands to actually go through this process with the VA. And so recently, within the last year, actually it took a couple years, but we got it all accomplished and everything's working well. So Firelands had an opportunity where the United States Veterans Administration had an outpatient clinic at the Ohio Soldiers and Sailors Home. The state no longer really wanted to maintain that lease, and the VA was looking for other opportunities. We, in turn, at Firelands, saw an opportunity at the South Campus, and in turn, we worked with the Veterans Administration and the Government Service Administration that handles the leases, and really put the pieces and parts together. So, while it's a little bit complicated, again, I had the experience as an attorney of going through the process, and these leases range from anywhere from 10 to 20 years, so it's very long term. And the expectation from the federal government is that they want a turnkey, but once they're there, they're there. and they don't want to be bothered, they want to run their operations and things along those lines. So again, there was an opportunity where I saw my personal experience of having expertise in this, that this seems to be something that might work. Now, the Port Authority does not have the resources as Firelands Community Hospital. We do not have a building department and a planning department, things along those lines. So one of the individuals I did speak with when we were working on the VA lease was John Hody. And John, in addition to being involved obviously in real estate, both residential and commercial, when in 2008, in the Great Recession, John saw what was something that was recession. And when one thing that recession-proof is the federal government. And so he, in turn, part of his company, really went out all throughout the country and looked at working on these leases. And John was very helpful and instrumental in helping me work through the process as we did the VA lease. And in turn, this opportunity, if you're willing to explore it with us, would be something where we would work, with Hody Enterprises on a consulting and management. But let me say that this arrangement, this partnership really is between the Port Authority and obviously the city. So what we've been to the Planning Commission now on 2 occasions, and generally it was well received. And in turn, we ultimately submitted the outline as presented in the packet that I'm presenting to you tonight, are just more or less the pieces and parts. Obviously, we're talking about a 20-year lease, so it's a long-term investment. We'd be talking about bond financing, talking to bond counsel that I know, that I've worked through Firelands, that they said, yep, it can be done, but the key thing is ultimately, the Port Authority will need to have, in essence, be able to lease that property for the 20 years, which then would allow for the sublet of the property to the U.S. Geological Survey. The bonding will allow for a couple things. One, the actual construction of the lab, and what the U.S. Geological Survey is, they're looking for a lab somewhere around approximately 5,000 square feet, very specific specifications. They're also looking for an outdoor storage area that would be secured. Obviously, they're maintaining their vessel right there in that port, and they're also looking for parking for obviously employees and visitors, but that does not need to be fenced in. So again, that's an important factor. So again, you wouldn't have the situation like you have with the Homeland Security Office in Port Clinton, where it looks like a friggin' fortress. That's not the case. Obviously, the United States Geological Survey is an important function. I mean, they are the scientists, the researchers that are looking at the health and the vitality of our lake. I mean, they're looking at the quality, and we all are aware of the fact that in the Western Basin we have algae blooms, we have issues dealing with water quality that obviously we want to see improve, because that not only helps the health of the community, but also the recreation and the economic vitality of the community as well. So again, it seemed like a golden opportunity. So on the U.S. Geological Survey, they had actually sent out requests for proposals, and they really did not receive anything that worked. So the whole thing had been tabled, and in talking with the U.S. Geological Survey, I said, now where are you in your time frame? And they said, well, we're at a point that we'd really like to work with the City of Huron, the Huron Port Authority. We'd like to be in Huron. We're not going to do another request for proposal, and if you're able to go ahead and put the pieces and parts together, we'd be more than happy to be looking at a long-term lease with the City Port Authority, working in conjunction with the City of Huron. So in turn, as we've outlined, as we've shared with the Huron Planning Commission, there's a lot of work to do, but the first real step for me, for the Port Authority, for Bond Council, for Dan Fredericks, our architect and engineer, for Hody Enterprises, is basically what I'm looking for, as outlined in my proposal here, 120-day non-binding memorandum of understanding, saying, hey, this sounds like a good idea. Let's take a flyer, let's look at this, and in turn, while that's non-binding, okay, but at the same time, it shows the commitment that this is something that's worth the time and energy of the Port Authority, the time and energy of the individuals that we would use to go ahead and put together the lease, put together the financial pro forma, put together the documents necessary so that we could then come back and present these to you, working in conjunction, obviously, with Andy and the rest of Andy's team to see. Now, long term, you're saying, well, what is it for the City of Huron? Well, the City of Huron ultimately will have the residual value of this investment in 20 years. That's a long time. So I'll be 81, but that's okay. I'm hoping I'll be in the city of Huron at that time. But the long story short, I think as we've outlined, there's a lot of additional value that you'd have. You'd have a long-time tenant, one that's there for 20 years, with real, vitality with not only with the employees, but, something that could be STEM research with regard to Ohio State or Firelands College, things along those lines. So there's a number of additional values. On the side for the Port Authority, what is it for us? Well, in turn, one, we want to see what's good for the community. We want to see economic development here in the community. It also is an opportunity for us during that period of time that we can begin to start generating revenue for the Port Authority, which then in turn will allow the Port Authority to do other investments, other projects as well. Like I said, right now we get about $2,500 a month in submerged land leases. We can't really do a whole lot of economic development. We can do a couple of nice projects with the Huron Historical Society and parks, but that's pretty much it. When you look around at port authorities, whether it's the Toledo Port Authority, the Cleveland Port Authority, Columbus Port Authority, these are large entities that really are economic machines. The other thing that's an advantage here is say, well, why don't Huron just do it on its own? Well, the reality of the situation is that will impact your bond financing. This is an opportunity, basically an entity tied in with Huron to allow the Port Authority to go ahead, issue the bonds, generate the revenue, not in any way negatively impact the bond financing or the bond credit rating of the city. And again, so when you're looking at it, it's just a tool in your toolkit for economic development here in the community. So that's the ask. I can honestly say that if this is not something that really makes sense, that's fine. And the Port Authority will go back to square one. I do want to share with you that I know the U.S. Geological Survey said they don't have a specific deadline. I can tell you that if we're not able to come up with something here over the next 4 to 5 months, I think the opportunity for them to be here and Huron will probably be lost. The gentleman I spoke with out in Colorado really likes Huron, but at the same time, he's been directed to say, look, if you're not, then we may have to look at Sandusky or some other community. So again, not a threat. I'm just kind of laying out the facts as to where we are. I think there's a golden opportunity. It's a long-term investment, but I think it's something that when you're looking at the building blocks that are needed for that economic development, that might be a nice way to start. The other big piece of this, to be sure that we haven't missed something, is the investment in the infrastructure, water, sewer, lift station. Obviously, while the research station will lead that, you can't finance those costs, which, talking to Mr. White, could be in excess of $1 million. We can incur some of that cost, but I think it's an opportunity that, in talking with bond counsel in Columbus and talking to some of my contacts in Columbus with the Port Authority, there are other research grants and other grants that may be available working with the city. And again, so simultaneously, I would be, putting pedal to the metal is what I'm trying to say, and really looking to see if there are some additional funding. I mean, I think if we can get some energy and Congresswoman Capter is behind this, I think there could be some really, really good positive results. The other thing to keep in mind is that my understanding in talking with the U.S. Geological Survey is that by virtue of the fact that this is a federal agency with a research station with its vessel on the river, it keeps the river open as part of the federal navigable water. So there is that other risk. Will we always have, large cargo freighters? I don't believe so, but I'd hate to lose those opportunities by, let's say, just relying on maybe one kind of development versus another. I think this is a development that potentially allows for mixed use of that property. It kind of ties in nicely with the boat ramp as well, with ODNR. And ODNR would be definitely an entity that we would also look to see about, maybe making some additional contributions with regard to those serious capital infrastructure. So I've done a lot of talking. Thank you. Any questions for me?
Mr. Genesi.
Go on.
Hi, Rob. Do you have a any budget on this thing right now? And
Right now, we're ballparking at $1.2 million.
you have I realize you want the 120 days to get the pro forma put together on enchilada there.
Right.
You don't have any kind of preliminary pro forma or
I
anything?
don't, I mean, other than in talking with, Mr. Hody and looking at some of the costs to build out, he did a similar, his company did a similar, project up in Wisconsin, on Lake Superior. And again, we were looking at about in excess of $1 million, so.
Yeah, I would assume that, and I know the Hodey's, quality people, Dan, quality people. Help me with this picture over here. This one in terms of I know it shows previously we were looking at 3 acres for a different developer.
But
Then you have a dotted, I see the building, but we have a dotted area that's greater. What land are you exactly looking?
So we're in that, I guess, we're in would be the southeast, corner of that particular, of the Conagra site. And you're looking at approximately about a little over an acre to an acre and a half of property. So as you're coming down, it would be to your immediate right.
We're talking about this.
So-
Property was swapped.
No, it would be on the other side. So actually, and right now, because of the trees that have grown up, it's hard to see the vessel, but where the vessel is, literally, they would like to bring it onto the other side. Yeah, and it would literally be in that corner is what they're looking for in the
I
development.
get that, I just want to know. I'm not being
Sure.
clear. There's a picture, in this picture,
Yeah.
it has a dotted area that goes beyond the area of the building. And I guess I want to understand. And this is not something you need tonight, I take it.
No, but I get, so we're at this, my directions are correct, we're at the southeast corner, as you're coming down to the boat ramp, so it would be to your immediate right as you're getting to the
Yeah.
base there,
I see that, Rob, and I see the building,
yeah.
but then I see land to the side. Is that all parking? Is that?
Yeah, so there was to meet the need both between the employees and again, I think this is shown a little bit larger, so, but it's generally an approximation of the number of area that they'll need with regard to parking for visitors, parking for employees, things along those lines.
So, okay, at first it seemed to me like it was a lot more land, I shouldn't say a lot, but it was more land than what the building was, but that's what you assign parking is.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind, Glenn, is that they do need, right there, kind of tucked in at the end of the slip there, they do need a secure storage area. That is for weather buoys, scientific buoys, the things that they can go ahead and actually lock up at night, that they don't keep on their boat.
Okay.
And the picture is just a kind of a general drawing that Dan Frederick, it's just kind of an idea of a nautical theme, kind of tying in with the current boat basin, lighthouse. But, again, that we'd have to meet the specifications specifically required by the U.S. Geological Survey. But it can look, nautical, it can have some nice shingles on it, things along those lines. So, yeah.
Mr. Tina, do you have a question or not?
Well, just a comment from the planning commission, we did, have 2 visits with, the Port Authority folks and, asked quite a few questions. The end results was that the planning commission overwhelmingly supported the concept. We still have to do, approve, the technical side of it, buildings and, architecture and everything. But, I think a couple of meetings with the, Economic Development Committee, there was favorable comments made about the concept also. I think this is a great opportunity for the city, and I think a strong port authority is what we really need to help us continue developing that property. I don't think we can do it by ourselves. So I appreciate your time. You're saying 120 days. What would you like to have from us tonight?
I guess what I'd like is a resolution of this council that the Port Authority could enter into a non-binding memorandum of understanding that there is at least a commitment that this is a good idea, that it makes sense, and then that'll allow us to go ahead expend the resources that the Huron Port Authority does have, talk to bond counsel. To Mr. Genesi's point, go ahead and put together a financial pro forma, and really lay it out, and there'll be full transparency, but it'll give us enough time to get those things done, but at the same time, either this is gonna work or it's not. So either by the end of November, we know that this is a good idea, and, we can go to the next level, or not, and we'll shelve it, and, we can move on, so.
Mr. White, where are we with the land transfer with the swap? This is part of that parcel, correct, that we need to get that cleared up with the state?
That's correct, but that's pending.
Okay.
We have to make contact with the folks at ODNR, but we've proceeded with the land, the platting of the street, the survey descriptions. We just have to have correspondence back and forth with the DNR folks,
Okay.
and then council to approve that. It can be done at the next meeting. It's that ready to go.
Thank you.
Has the previous request for proposal, I know there were some local entities that were involved in a different site, request or proposal submitted. Has that been killed, like officially, formally? So
Yeah, I mean,
no one can come back and say,
No, they've shut that off, and so I think what was explained to me, by the U.S. Geological Survey is that they have the discretion, they'll do the request for proposal. If there are viable partners, then they're more than happy to take the next step. They did not receive anything that rose to the level that they could really act upon. Again, not any criticism of any of the local entities that may have been interested in this. I can just tell you through the process that I went through with the VA. Again, I have a law department, I have, paralegals, I've got, I even have a law clerk still with me right now that's gonna help me on this project if we get the green light. But there's some lifting, and there's a lot of detail, because like I said, the federal government wants a turnkey. And if you get the right people in place, and the right resources, you can make that happen, so.
question for either Mr. Artino or Mr. White. I don't know if it was Economic Development Committee or Planning Commission, where I know there's been some discussion about inviting other developers to look kind of at the site comprehensively, and some discussion regarding maybe having an event later this fall about coming out, looking at the facility, or looking at the land, the parcel, and then having some other ideas. Has this been discussed kind of in conjunction with that, and what is the?
I brought that up at the economic development meeting the other night, and I think it seemed like everyone felt that could be, the RFQ could be modified to fit that need.
If I may.
Yeah.
The Economic Development Committee has recommended that an RFQ be prepared and council to send that out to qualified developers for that parcel. I think the committee likes the idea of having USGS there. I mean, it's, they like that idea. I think, just like any, the other, we have to look at it's all gonna come back to finances, and I think that's what you were saying, Rob. I don't disagree with you. And you need to have some time to do due diligence to do it properly.
You're correct.
And I guess, I don't want what I'm gonna say to be misunderstood as saying I agree. I agree we need to find more out, but I also don't wanna make a decision and get something, because we've been accused of things where we get something to vote on at the same night. We're not gonna vote on something the same night. But I have no problem about having a resolution prepared so that the next meeting, after we have a couple weeks to digest this, and then give you an answer next to enter into it or not.
Okay.
So and with that in mind, I have no qualms about asking, requesting the administration prepare a resolution that then we can consider at the next meeting. And I'll make that in the form of a motion to prepare legislation, a resolution.
I don't see why we don't try to vote on it tonight. Why not? I think it's very plain and simple. We're not going 100% towards something. We're giving a 120-day period. let them do their due diligence. I don't see any problem with that.
If I can, I'm sorry, Mr. I can interrupt. I can interject. I think that is not I think that's a prudent course of action. I mean, you know, being an attorney that's been involved in government for a long time, so, that's in 2 weeks, I believe.
That's correct.
Yeah, and so I think if we could go ahead and be happy to work with Mr. White and his team, and we can kind of work on some of the documentation, allow me to flesh some of this out. In the interim, we'll definitely start the process. I guess where you know, it's kind of that leap of faith. So the leap of faith is, like I said, this takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and there's some costs associated with it. I just really need to know that, am I barking up the wrong tree? I mean, I take it from the anecdotal feedback that I've received from all of you, that this is worth something to pursue. And it also allows that the other 10 acres or approximately whatever is left to be developed. The big contingency here too is working with the city to try to get the necessary capital to pay for that infrastructure. Because without that, I mean, nothing's gonna get going. So we just see that as a partnership. But I mean, I think if we could, we'd be happy to work with Andy and his team to come back in 2 weeks and answer any additional questions, so.
If I may.
Hang on 1 second. Mr. Jones, do you want to make a comment?
I just have a comment, especially being a newbie, was not able to make the Economic Development Committee meeting. I'm puzzled, and again, being new, maybe I should understand this, that it hasn't been that long ago that this council turned down an offer to sell a piece of property in that same area. Not the same size, I understand that. So I'm having trouble understanding how we are looking at something that provides no revenue to the city. Yet, as Mr. Moore pointed out, there'll be expenditures of close to $1 million, which could be grant funded, I understand that, there could be opportunities. But I don't quite understand and would like a little bit, maybe more information on how we consider something that basically we don't get much other than, how many employees with this?
Great question, Mr. Jones, and thank you. So to answer those questions, right now there's approximately between 12 to 15 employees at that location. With regard to the bond financing, again, the ability for us to do that, it's not the city that would be borrowing the money, it would be the Port Authority.
I'm talking about infrastructure.
Right. And the infrastructure really goes back to what Mr. White has worked on, and I think has gotten some of that in place. But our ability to go down to the Columbus and talk with, you know, resources down there, talk to Congresswoman Capter, basically selling the project. And, you know, $1 million is a lot of money for all of us. But I think in the long term, you know, it's amazing when you've got a good project and something that really is a catalyst and that has, and again, we're talking about the federal government here, and the Congresswoman likes to do things that, you know, puts a feather in her hat, and that's good. I mean, she's representing us. But in turn, you know, she's able to maybe bring something on there. So that's a huge contingency, absolutely. And if we don't have those funding, we're, you know, again, we're out of luck, or at least we're out of luck at this point. But I think I'm willing, and the Port Authority is willing to make an attempt at this. But what we need to do to structure the financing, we do need the commitment from the city to at least say, yeah, it looks good, we're willing to make that long-term investment. At the end, as outlined in my proposal, the residual value of this, now 20 years from now, goes to the city. Ultimately, that 20-year lease between the city and the Port Authority ends. The city then is in a position to either re-let to the U.S. Geological Survey, they can sell it, they can let it to somebody else. So again, it's a long-term investment, but I can tell you, $1.2 million investments, granted, depreciation, time, but you're still gonna have value there. You're still gonna have anywhere between $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 of value of valuable lake or riverfront property, so.
Mr. Schafter. Payroll, estimated to be at
I'm-
payroll, annual payroll.
I have no idea, Mr. Schaffer.
7 figures?
We can check it out, it's public record.
that's
but-
fine.
Yeah, but no, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure. other than, you know, what the U.S. Geological Survey has kind of given us a general idea as to the number of employees. You know, we're talking about researchers, we're talking about people that run the vessels, so we can try to pull together a list. I mean, that is public record, so we can find out.
Do we have a ballpark on that, 110?
Yeah, I think it's seven figures.
Yeah.
I guess if I could just interject too, I think what's being requested of council's consideration for a due process clearing out of some of these questions that are being addressed right now, and that if one was entered into, you would have payroll records that we could look at. We would talk about additional engineering analysis that may have to be done at the site, because there was an assumption on our part prior to this that site in particular was not as impacted by the compaction issues, so that may not need some of the significant compaction. There's a host of other issues that could be looked at and updated, including the cost of the building, getting down into estimates and looking at this thing that, to Mr. Moore's point, would be non-binding. If you want to go in that direction, you could have those answers. I think it's premature to try to ask Mr. Moore to address those questions of taxation and engineering at this point, but if council's intent is to explore a mechanism with which to activate the site, bringing in $1 million building, having some employment, there are residual benefits potentially to have that infrastructure. There are a host of questions that I think we all have, including the Port Authority's perspective going forward, that could make this an impossible lift, but right now, we just don't know until we get a little bit more serious. I think the point of consideration that we've heard is that there's a willing and interested tenant. It's probably going to be making a decision on a permanent location here in the next 6 months, with or without Huron. So if council's intention is to explore that further, then I think Mr. Moore's correct. We could resolve at the next meeting to come up with specific language both sides can entertain, and you can make that action.
Mr. Jameson?
Yeah, again, I think it's unfair to ask Mr. Moore some of these questions. That's what he needs some time. It's also, I've had enough over the past couple of years, had enough people say, slow down, let's look at it, don't like this, things coming up and voting on it the same day. I'm not accusing you, please don't take it that way. But that's the reason, whether it's one I like or whether it's one I don't like, it doesn't matter. If we're gonna slow down, we're gonna slow down them all and not look at something unless it's truly emergency. I understood that we have a 4 or 5 month window here which I don't think 2 weeks affects you. I took it from your comments, it doesn't negatively affect it. However, I think it's reasonable to give them an answer 2 weeks from now at our next meeting, and to give them the answer he really needs. We need to have legislation prepared, otherwise we're gonna be out 2 more weeks. So I'm trying to be fair and say, let's order in the legislation, we'll make a decision then. I personally think it's great to have these people here to do everything. I think it's all. The real question is, what's the best way for the city to do this? And if it's the Port Authority, I'm gonna vote for it. If it isn't, I'm not gonna vote for it. But until we do some of this due diligence, then it's just anecdotal evidence. And let's get back to the fact, because also I think in my heart, I know Mr. Moore for years, he wouldn't want us to do what's not best for the city anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson.
So that's why I made the motion, and I don't want to cut off debate anymore if anybody wants to speak, but I think it's reasonable to order in legislation for a decision in 2 weeks. And that's why I'm not, Mr. Dyke, in fairness, that's why I don't think it's appropriate to do it tonight.
Do we need a formal motion to order in legislation for consideration?
I believe that was.
I believe I did that.
The pending motion
Okay.
was for that
All right.
purpose, to have
So-
legislation. It's my understanding, Mr. Moore, that this will be to authorize an actual memorandum of understanding, so that would be something that my office would want to review anyway.
Do we want to have that at the meeting as well, or?
It would be part of the resolution.
Okay.
That MOU would have the nuts and
Yeah.
bolts of
All right.
what we're committing to.
So we're gonna have both the resolution, pending the motion, the approval of the motion, we're gonna have the resolution plus a copy of the MOU to review.
Schopper.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Martina.
Yes.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you,
Very
Mr.
good,
Moore.
thanks.
Okay, moving on, new business, resolution 2019-44. Mr. Schopper.
Mr. Mayor, the three reading will be suspended and resolution 2019-44 be placed on its first reading.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schopper. Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Martina.
Yes.
Genesi.
Yes.
Resolution number 2019-44, a resolution authorizing the city manager to provide consent and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for participation in the Bridge Inspection Program Services Project, PID number 109334.
Mr. White would like to comment?
Mayor and council, this is before you for approval as recommended by staff. We started this program back in 2014 on the inspections through the state of Ohio. Previously to that, we had to retain an outside engineering firm to do this. The state of Ohio made these program dollars available to reduce the burden on localities in light of some of the state budgetary changes. So 100% of the costs associated with this assessment analysis project is the ownership of the state of Ohio. It's a 3-year term for the ODOT Bridge Inspection Program, and we would appreciate an approval.
Anyone have any other comments or questions? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schopper.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Martina.
Yes.
Genesi.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on, resolution 2019-45. Mr. Artino.
Mr. Mayor, I move three reading rule be suspended, resolution 2019-45 be placed on its first reading.
Any discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Martina.
Yes.
Genesi.
Yes.
Schopper.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Resolution number 2019-45, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Huron Township for the allocation of partial funding of the school resource officer position within Huron City Schools for a period of 3 years.
Mr. White, any comment? We have a school resource officer here in the.
Yes. This position was originally funded almost entirely through outside grants, through the drug use prevention. We've seen those funds, decrease successfully over the last several years, to the point where we are no longer going to pursue them. Through the relationship that this, legislation established with the schools, the city and the township, the city is able to fund this position 9 months out of the year within the school, paid for in thirds, and then in the summer, when we have spike in population, the officers back in the operation. And so I'd like to recognize the investment of the school board and the township board of trustees in making this happen, because without those two funding mechanisms, we'd probably be one short in the PD, which would be a problem for the school operation, but also in the summer for us. So I'd like to recommend this for adoption as well.
Any comments or questions? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Martina.
Yes.
Genesi.
Yes.
Schopper.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Okay. Next up, ordinance 2019-17. Mr. Schopper.
Mr. Mayor, I move that ordinance, three reading will be suspended, ordinance 2019-17 be placed on its first reading, please.
Any discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schopper.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Martina.
Yes.
Genesi.
Yes.
Ordinance number 2019-17, and ordinance amending ordinance number 2018-36, adopted December 11, 2018, to provide for additional appropriations from the general fund and other funding sources, and an increase in estimated resource, and further approving cash transfers between funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Schopper.
I move that ordinance 2019-17 be passed on first reading.
Any discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schopper. Crawford.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Martina.
Martina,
Yes.
Jim Easy.
Yes.
Mr. Swayze, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So the ordinance in front of you here is, actually, it looks a little different than what it has in the past, but in working with the law director, any type of budget amendment to appropriations or estimated resources and cash transfers are gonna be seen all in one ordinance going forward. So the ordinance in front of you today is a supplemental appropriation, which is an additional appropriation of about $44,000 to the capital equipment reserve and replacement fund, and this was just a mistake that wasn't included in the budget, the initial budget for 2019. These 44,000 was due to, was payment for 2 vehicles on the street department for a lease that is recurring every year. So as I noted here in the summary, the funds, the unrestricted, unencumbered funds are available, and they were, it just was omitted, mistakenly omitted from the 2019. So that's part of the supplemental appropriations. The increase in estimated resources and additional appropriations for in the amount of about $4.6 million is due to the bond issuance from last month. So we are budgeting for the proceeds of the bond issuance and the cost of the issuance of about $4.6 million. And as you see from the summary, the net impact of this is actually a positive $1.8 million. So there's no impact on reserves or anything here. It's just mainly for accounting reasons that we have to record it this way. So that's part of the budget side. The cash transfer between funds, the second piece, is a recurring budgeted cash transfer from the fire levy fund to the fire pension fund, just to fund that pension liability.
Any questions or comments for any of the staff? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schauber,
Yes.
Crawford,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Martina,
Yes.
Jim Easy.
Yes.
Okay, moving on, city manager's discussion.
Got a couple items to review. First, we were noticed today, Norfolk Southern will be closing the intersection at its William Street crossing in between Standard and Bogart, and that will be done for routine maintenance beginning August 15th at 7:30 a.m., including Wednesday, August 21st at 10 a.m. Additionally, I had a brief conversation with Mr. Artino and maybe a couple of others relative to the joint port authority. But one of the things that I sought to bring up tonight that we didn't really talk about is a potential other option for its use within the community. As a coastal community and the elevation difference with the lake, we've experienced a lot of flooding in private areas. Just preliminarily, we started to look at it as a funding mechanism similar to what was talked about tonight, whereby associations could contact or contract with the Port Authority for the issuance of the same type of funding mechanisms, and then agree to pay those dollars off over time, therefore giving them additional dollars to deal with this type of change in weather patterns or lake elevations. We've talked with Ms. Cloak, I think you're here this evening, actually, and a number of the associations on the east side. There's a lot less beach out there. I just wanted to mention that to council for discussion. That's another alternative. I think the Port Authority could be well suited to aid in those private developments. The Safe Routes to School project got off to an inauspicious start. Apologize for the inconvenience of the traffic pattern, but that was changed that afternoon. I think subsequently the traffic has moved fairly well. I don't know if you've had any kind of calls or concerns on that. Mr. Jones and I had a conversation regarding some of the sidewalk that's in existence within that area. I think most notably the segment along Colonial County, but also further west around Wexford. There's some existing sidewalks within that don't really tie into anything right now. And the concern has been, how are we gonna make sure that that's not a trip hazard going forward? So Mr. Green's looking into that for me. Talking with some of the associations. For the project that's, the project area stops before Colonial County. So if you have the opportunity to drive through that section of Cleveland Road West, there are significant panels that are in disrepair. we're working with the property owners to try to get them to sign off on our contractor's price right now, so we can do the entire job at that time. I have it tied out by the end of this project cycle, closing out this fall. And we'll do the same within some of those intersections, but the project is defined right now. These are state dollars that have to be used to the Safe Routes to School project, not a supplemental exercise, but we are having that conversation. Also, Mr. Genesi had inquired on some of the maintenance on Cleveland Road West, I'll call it east of the Huron Memorial Bridge, kind of at the intersection of Berlin Road. I think we've talked about it. There are several property owners within the north side of that that are actually responsible for the segments of sidewalk. It's encroached, the grass has kind of grown over, so I think when you say Doug, it's down to about a 3-foot expanse in some cases as opposed to the 4. Obviously, we've got traffic counts in that area. There's some significant speeds that go through there. We want to protect the public, and so we're trying to coordinate in the next 6 months. The entire project is going to start, so that those segments will be addressed and replaced. But in the meantime, we're trying to work with some of the property owners affected to see if we can't clean that up further. I think there was 4 property owners.
Yeah.
Work on that, and then we did have one request for an executive session this evening for pending litigation.
I would say pending and threatened litigation.
Pending and threatened. And then the last comment I wanted to make, there was a statement made earlier this evening about a statement that I made, and that was also attributed to council relative to a question I received from Mrs. Murphy regarding the Open Meetings Act violation. I just want to clarify the record. I misspoke, but I did not lie, polite or otherwise. Just want to make that clarification. I do not believe it was council's intent in its silence to support something that was dishonest. That was a mistake, and I apologize to Ms. Murphy. I did reach out to her at that time, if you recall, and requested that she contact me for additional conversation. I have not heard back. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor's,
I'm sorry, I have a question.
okay, go ahead.
Mr. White, I have spoken with you on several occasions about the lighting around the amphitheater, the boat basin.
Yes.
And I just wondered if you had an opportunity to look into that any further.
Yes, specifically, if you are familiar with calling the orb lights in the amphitheater, they're dated, but essentially it's just a glow ball atop of a light post. I don't know what the date they were put in, but they're aged. I think there's anywhere between 7 and 8 that are either missing or out at the moment, and we have had some inquiry. Staff has had an assessment done. It took about 3 months to get an engineer firm to stamp whether or not the poles themselves were of the integral strength that would support a new fixture. We've just got that back. And now the question, I think, is going to come down to policy. We have the funds available to replace the orb structures. The internal discussion we're having is whether or not we want to swap those out for the Cap Harbor style light that has been put throughout the North Main Street section. So I think we can include that in your next council discussion for some direction, and perhaps it's something we want to take up with the Parks Board. But we have the funds available. We just haven't secured the specific direction on how we want to move forward with that. And I've taken the input from council as we try to get there. But mainly it's, do we want to replace what is there or upgrade it to look more complementary to the newer lighting that we're going towards?
Thank you, Mike.
Anyone else have any questions or comments for the city manager, Mr. Martino?
I would like to thank staff and the first responders. We've had a few really tragic weeks in town, and I think you all worked very diligently and quickly to get come to some resolutions. I appreciate it, and I'd like to think that it will help as we go forward. Thanks again.
Any questions, comments under city manager's discussion? I'll be brief. To Mr. Artino's point under mayor's discussion, I also wanted to thank staff, Parks and Rec Department, our safety services. A big thank you to Latanic Equipment. They donated a gate for the park down there to help kind of manage traffic in and out, especially on days when we feel like it's necessary to close the beach. We're not done. We still have some other information we're trying to gather, and we're going to continue to make the beach safer for our residents and for visitors going forward for the remainder of this year and for the following seasons to come. So thank you for everyone and your efforts there. That's all I had under mayor's discussion. So for the good of the order, we'll start with Mr. Schopper.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I have one thing. This Port Authority presentation was great tonight. I would like to know if a certain council member has a conflict in this because he has investment property along the riverfront. And if he does, then I don't think he should participate in the discussion of the vote. And I don't know where to go get that opinion, but I think we need it.
Okay, well, I guess my office would have to review that. So I guess we could have that conversation and.
That's fine.
I can,
Is it a conflict or is it not?
okay, obviously I would need more information at this moment, but, I'll go through that process.
Ms. Coughlin.
I just wanted to echo your sentiments, Mayor Hardy. I think I mentioned it at the last meeting, our safety services have really gone through it this year. Police, fire, marine, my hat is off to all of them, then staff, again, Latanic Equipment, parks, everyone who was involved with the quick evaluation, community communication, ideas, and thank you to the community for those of you who shared ideas, resources that you found. The Nickel Plate Beach incident, I think we have nowhere to go but up. Great ideas, immediate, not solutions, but steps and awareness. So thank you to anybody and everyone, and nothing but my utmost respect for everyone involved. The Safe Routes to School, anytime you change traffic, I know it's not gonna be the best for everybody. Again, staff reacted quickly when they realized that plan A wasn't gonna work and they had a plan B in their pocket. Thank you again for adapting and rolling. I've noticed an increase in communication coming out of City Hall. I know we've got a terrific intern helping us with social media, but Christine's office as well. Council packets are being broadcast to a greater range of individuals, so there is a noticeable dissemination of information. My appreciation for that. And Andy, I apologize, Mr. White, I should have asked during the discussion, have we taken any further steps on expanding even further communication, a city newsletter, anything happening on that front? I know now with Mike, being kind of back in his, where we think we're gonna have him for a while.
Yeah, we had a meeting last week to put together a proposal to bring back, additional communication. Since you brought up the other points too, so I'll have a further report on that when we had a discussion about the city's needs. And, we'll await the proposal, and I think we'd like to execute something and have an enhanced, outreach with, we haven't done the current this year, we haven't done the magazine. We'd like to have at least 1/4 of that taken care of, and then look at other options with, some of the social media platform to, do further outreach. And since you brought up the nickel plate, there's a lot that's still, kind of winding out that I think will include itself in the 2020 budget discussion. We only have a few more weeks left of the actual beach operation, but the specifics of an actual swim area is something that we're really interested in doing. We met with Mark Sensory on our planning commission. He's also an engineer with KS Engineering. They've done a lot of this work on Lake Erie in the Cleveland metropolitan area to understand, in addition to the general weather patterns that affect nickel plate, there's also a lot more water on top of the average. So what is the impact, and to understand that engineering wise will demonstrate some of the energies that are recoiling off of the infrastructure that's in place, and, where is the best area to put that swim area. And so we'll have something for you guys to digest on that, and put together, a more defined swim area for 2020 season. And we'll also be looking at some additional, upgrades. One of the things we're looking at is the actual beach area relative to the city's lease and where we actually operate. The actual lease that the city has with the Norfolk Southern extends well east of the ditch maintenance area that we have right now. And there's a number of no trespassing signs that are effectively on the city's property, so we need to evaluate, how to utilize that to make sure that if there's a dangerous portion of the beachfront closer to the East Pier, can we get further? We don't have the resources right now to handle that type of beach maintenance because it's a significant portion. But that's something that we're evaluating as well, and we'll continue to look at it through that budget process.
Thank you. And one last thing, I received an email from someone who resides in Northport Lane, and I'll admit, I didn't get a chance to drive down there. She's indicating they have no street signs at all, no speed limit signs, no nothing. That's not a private street, is it?
It's a planned unit development, condo association.
Okay,
Do you know where that is? Yeah, it's public street. Yeah.
okay.
I thought they had a street sign.
Would you mind, Mr. Green, thank you, and then I'll get back to her. That's all I have.
Mr. Jones?
I first want to thank the council for giving me this opportunity. I appreciate the support and confidence, and I'm obviously trying my best. I've got a lot of calls of congratulations, and it took exactly 1 day to get a call from somebody that had a concern about drainage that I got to be involved with. So it didn't take long, but I really do appreciate it. I also want to thank administration and staff for putting up with me and getting me ready for this meeting. They did an awesome job. I was here about every day, figuring out what I was supposed to do. So it was very beneficial, and I certainly appreciate that. And I echo the same sentiments about the safety upgrades and the people that worked hard at Nickel Plate. I was there with Mr. White Tuesday when they opened the gate and saw all the things and talked about the plan. So hopefully I'm up to speed with that. So thank you very much.
Mr. Bank?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Mr. Antino?
I'm glad to see us involve people like Mark Spencer and other folks from town that are very knowledgeable. I'm glad to see the Port Authority taking an active role. I think most of us will agree that it's an organization that has been underutilized, and remember, that is part of the city and the township together. So it's good to see those things go on. Thank you.
Mr. Jansen?
Yeah, I do have one comment, and I don't have an answer, but I want to share an incident that happened to me after I left the last council meeting. I went home. I had to go visit my neighbor for the very important thing of getting beef jerky for the golf outing I was going to attend. And at first, the wife of the butcher that lives by me was a little startled. She says, "Oh, I thought you were the kids across the street." And here, there's a home that's rented, in our neighborhood. There's a lot of homes that are rented. And she pointed out to me that for the time these kids that were renting it, that every day they've been out, every night they were out in the car, and I assumed that they were doing drugs. That's just a simple statement of, I assumed that. And then I thought back to that previous Sunday, they were up by the car all afternoon. And while I was washing my car, and I never even gave a thought to it, I thought they were just saying goodbye to a friend. But I washed my entire car in that time. It seemed like a long time to say goodbye. There's a lot of homes that are rented in Huron. And there are a lot of people coming in, and unfortunately, they're all not great people like I like to think all the people of Huron are. And I just think this is something we have to address before we get to next summer. Literally, somebody's doing drugs, I'm telling you, 20 feet from my property. And not that it's my property, it could be your property, it could be anybody's property, and they don't deserve that. That's not why we live in Huron. And I do think that this is something that has to be, I tried to take some steps to get somebody there. By the time that happened, they were gone, but, in this one instance, but, we do have to address this more. It's a great place to live, it's a great place to visit, we benefit from all these visitors, but there is an ugly side to it, and we gotta work to eliminate the ugly side. And that's all I have. I'm sorry to end it on that kind of a note.
Okay, if there's nothing further, the chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of continued and threatened litigation.
Mr. Mayor, I move we go into executive session for the purpose of pending and threatened litigation.
No business after, no further business after the meeting. Okay. Okay. Would the clerk please call the roll on the motion?
Crawford,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.